For many people, the all-American road trip is the epitome of freedom and adventure. The irresistible thrill of the open road is hard to deny, but what sorts of things can you get up to along the way? Maryland, Virginia and Washington DC are collectively known as America's Capital Region, and I've come to drive the historic National Road. It's one of the region's many scenic byways, historically significant roads that tell the story of America's past as you travel through some of the most exquisite scenery in the land. It was the first highway to be funded by the American government, connecting the settled eastern seaboard to the interior of the country, heading west through the Allegheny Mountains. Construction began on the highway in 1806, but it wasn't long before the project ran into trouble.
The federal government couldn't keep up the road, so the state built toll gate houses to collect taxes. If you wanted your pigs and your sheep and your cows to go, you had to pay a toll. If you were in a carriage that had 2-inch wide wheels, you had to pay a lot more money because the wheels were tearing up the road. The toll house has an office where the man would go out and collect the tolls. A family would live there in a living room. There was a nice kitchen with a fireplace and a nice large bedroom. The toll house has 7 sides, and when the stagecoaches would come down through, they'd blow a trumpet. And then if the guy was sleeping in his bed, he could lift out his bed and look out any window and see where the stagecoach or wagon was coming from.
Fortunately, the road itself has been modernised considerably since those early 19th century days. However, many of the historical features still exist. Just off the byway is the Castleman River Bridge. It might not look like that much now, but when it was built in 1813, it was the longest single archway bridge of its kind. It's a pretty good place to stop, fancy a snack, plenty of picnic tables, and lots of people come here for the Spruce Forest Artisans Village. The village is an arts and heritage centre located in the Appalachian Mountains of western Maryland and offers a chance to catch a unique behind-the-scenes glimpse of artists working on site. The village community all earn their living from their handiwork, and many are celebrated craftsmen, like Gary Yoder, an award-winning sculptor specialising in all things ornithological.
And get that kind of sense into the bird, that's what I really try to do.
As you drive the historic National Road, also known as Route or Route 40, you travel through many villages and towns that have barely changed for 200 years. Frederick, the second largest city in Maryland, is now a centre for wine touring, adventure sports and arts and culture. However, it once played a significant part in America's military history.
Well, of course, we've got a great, vibrant downtown area here with shopping and dining, but we also have a lot of the American Civil War story here. We are close to Antietam, Gettysburg, Harper's Ferry. We have our own national battlefields here, and we have the National Museum of Civil War Medicine right here in town. But we also have a lot of offerings from recreational. We have mountain parks here. We have the Chesapeake and Ohio Canal National Historical Park, covered bridges. So we've got a lot of opportunities, a lot of different things for people to do.
My first impression of here is that it feels and looks like a movie set. I am really lucky with the weather, and the buildings do look like they've been superimposed onto the blue sky. Hollywood doesn't need to look much further for a fine example of small town America. But it is actually a city, and it's situated here on the map. And if you follow the road east, you'll end up in Baltimore. But if you go west through 6 states, you'll end up in Illinois, and I have no idea how many miles that is, but it does seem like an awfully long way. However, there is a lot to do on the route. The Scenic Byway Network undoubtedly opens up the country and is a far more enjoyable way to travel than being stuck on the rather charmless interstate highways. A town well worth stopping off along the byway is Ellicott City, a historic mill town founded in 1772.
This used to be where the mill workers would live, and they'd really kind of fallen into disrepair. They used to be kind of the part of town that folks didn't pay attention to, and now they've sort of become the cover image for our town. So
they're made of granite.
Yep, granite. It's all locally quarried here. There was about a dozen quarries along the river, and it's repurposed throughout the town. And as we walk along, you're actually going to see big giant rocks jutting out of Main Street that are still here. So yeah.
It's home to many independent stores and emporiums selling all manner of Americana bric-a-brac, perfect for stocking up on those offbeat presents.
This is Shoemaker Country, one of the really popular stores in town.
So they don't make shoes,
They
despite
don't
the
make
name.
shoes, no, just fabulous furniture. I love the repurposing. It gives things new life. It's kind of environmentally conscious too, that instead of things ending up in a landfill, they're getting a new life again in someone's home. Modern, chic, sort of urban-looking furniture that you can find here too.
And comfortable chairs like this one. Ellicott City is also home to the oldest remaining passenger railway station in the United States. At one time, it serviced the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad line, and rather like the road, was directly responsible for America's expansion. The B&O Railroad Museum in Baltimore houses many of the original engines that steamed along those tracks in an enormous 19th century roundhouse.
I like to call the railroad sort of the first internet because it connected places where people couldn't get to before, at least not easily. And certainly it changed the way people heated their homes, it changed the way people communicated with one another.
Now, having a look at some of the others, there's a marked transition. I mean, that to me is a beautiful looking thing.
Well, in order to get more power, they found out that a larger boiler was necessary. So they laid them down in a horizontal fashion. And the one you're referring to actually dates from the American Civil War period. And engines at that time were actually a thing of beauty. Civil War actually was a breakthrough in railroading because it was the first time the railroads engaged in a wartime activity.
And now this one here, the 592, is my favourite one. Because it's enormous.
This is one of actually the fastest steam locomotives that ever ran in America.
Wow.
This locomotive in its day in the 1920s was capable of running at more than 100 miles an hour. And so the time it took to get from DC to New York is about the same as it does on Amtrak today.
When you take a look at the landscape along the historic National Road, it's hard to imagine how those early pioneers carved their way through the dense woodland and low-lying mountains. But the picturesque countryside that unfolds before you now belies Maryland's past as home to some of the bloodiest battles of the Civil War, the worst of which took place here at the Antietam National Battlefield in Sharpsburg.
This is the site of the single bloodiest one-day battle in American history, and definitely the most bloodiest and violent day in the American Civil War.
So this was Union sort of forces against rebel forces.
Exactly. In a 12-hour day here, over 23,110 Americans were either killed or wounded. There are still 145 missing soldiers here on this battlefield that were never found.
Wow.
It was said that this was the day that the Civil War stopped being civil. When you look across these fields and open grounds, you can't imagine this sort of thing happening here. It's so quiet and so peaceful. And our job is to allow people to come here and remember what happened. And to remember the mistakes we made so we can get to where we're at today and hopefully continue to improve and be a better country.
On the outskirts of the battlefield is Newcomer House, a modest two-storey property dating back to before the violent struggles, and is now home to the Civil War Heritage Area Exhibition, a collection of photographs, archaeological finds and personal items that tell the human story of the war. It's been lovingly restored to as close to its original state as possible, plus the inclusion of a bathroom. And the reason why I'm wearing this very heavy woolen outfit as the temperature nudges into the 30s is because it's believed the people who used to live here were Union sympathisers. And this is what they would have worn. It comes complete with a horn. Having little or even no knowledge of America's Civil War really shouldn't put you off travelling the historic National Road. First of all, it's really easy to connect with the past because of the landscape. It hasn't changed much at all. The people here are so proud of their heritage and they really want to share it. And the thing that I was most worried about, getting lost. First of all, there's plenty of signage to help you out. And also, I've come to realise that getting lost is actually part of the fun.